Hi everyone. I hope you guys are having an excellent week. I've really enjoyed reading all of your weekly reports that you're sharing from the BBC and also getting all of your exciting, interesting facts. So again, this week I want you to send me one of the interesting facts that you find from today's video. Also, I would like for you to send me a interesting fact about yourself. I want to do a discussion board, sort of like a guess, get to know you type thing with the class, so we can get to know each other a little bit better via online. So I'm going to ask that you send me a interesting fact about yourself, as well as an interesting fact about today's video. So last time we talked a little bit about England. This time I want to talk a little bit about Scotland. Next week we're going to talk a little bit about the media, sort of some of the ag policies, before we move on to our next steps. So a little bit of background about Scotland. Again, I want to sort of just give you the surface level highlights, some interesting things. As we noticed last time, Scotland is sort of the northern third of Great Britain, second largest in the UK behind England. The official language is English, but you will hear some Gaelic, you'll hear some sort of Scots. We will definitely hear a much thicker accent when we're in Scotland versus when we're in England. And the currency is still the pound as we would have had in England. So in terms of Scotland, we're going to come up into Scotland, sort of go through, we're going to hit sort of Glasgow, Edinburgh, sort of this area. So we're not going to have enough time to get up into the Highlands or the Western Isles of Scotland. I wish we had time or even hit the Shetland Islands, but we will get a good view of Scotland per se. Some of the interesting natural things about Scotland. Scotland has 800 islands along its coast, so you can sort of see all of the many islands around here, and these are just the big ones. 130 of those are inhabited, and then they have a lot of what they consider lochs, large bodies of water. You can, I was trying to see if you could see any of them in here, but I don't think you can see them on our map. Obviously, Loch Lomond, Loch Ness, Loch Awe, Loch Maree are the biggest. Loch Ness is obviously the most popular because of the Loch Ness monster. I'm afraid we weren't going to have time to go look for Nessie per se, but the first reference to the Loch Ness monster was in 565 AD when a water beast attacked one of St. Columba's followers into the loch. And St. Columba is sort of one of the patron saints there of Scotland. So there's a lot of mystery and mystique in Scotland, starting even with Nessie. In terms of people, population of Scotland is 5.2 million, and I sort of wanted to put that into perspective. Last time we talked about England, but London alone was 7 million. So there's more people in London than there is in the whole of Scotland. Columbus, to put it into perspective, this number is a little old, but 797,000 in the metro area. So, like I said, we're going to mostly hit Edinburgh, which is 486,000. So it's a little smaller than Columbus. Glasgow is a little smaller than Columbus. Not much smaller. So you'll see population. Demographic-wise, birth rate, death rate, just like we said in England, it's really important to start thinking about those type of economic values, demographic values, and how a country is run. So the birth rate is 11.3 births per thousand, death rate 10.3 deaths per thousand. So it's around there. Between 2009 and 10, the rate was 0.54 population growth. So it's fairly steady. Life expectancy is 61.3 for female and 79.1 for male. And I did want to caveat this and also go back and caveat sort of the England. We were all sort of surprised on those numbers, and I started thinking a little bit more about them. And these numbers that I'm giving you aren't necessarily just life expectancy. They're the average life expectancy with the average healthy life expectancy. So people may live longer than that, but this is sort of their healthy life, their active life. So the true life expectancy may be slightly higher than this, but this is sort of that healthy life. So females 61, males 79. Literacy 99%, just like England, a very well-educated country. And 50 million people from around the world claim Scottish ancestry, probably over 50 million. Scottish ancestry is very large ancestry, and we'll see here in a second one reason why that is. A couple quick facts. Official animal is the unicorn. England was the lion. So we will see when we're in Edinburgh, when we see the castle there, you'll see banners with the lion versus the unicorn. You'll see that a lot. The official flower is the thistle. I'm not really sure why. We might need to research that a little bit more. And then the motto is, "No one provokes me with impunity." So a little interesting facts. In terms of the government of Scotland, this is one of the palaces that is here at Edinburgh that we will go see, that is still lived in by the Queen. It's still the constitutional monarchy. However, while they do have the Prime Minister of the UK and the Queen of England, they are of the UK, they also have what they consider their first Minister of Scotland, and currently it's Nicola Sturgeon. And Nicola is the first female First Minister of Scotland, and also the first female sort of minister in the UK. So sort of an interesting time right then. Scotland sort of gained its independence back in 1314 from England in the army at the Battle of Bannockburn. Again, I'm not going to go too far into it, but they did have their own monarchy until 1603 at this point. After Elizabeth I died, and James VI became James I of England and started ruling both countries. So when Elizabeth I died, England was looking for a new ruler, and sort of they combined that royalty. The Kingdom of Scotland sort of remained independent until 1707, when the sort of Acts of Union joined it with England. And since that time, it has been part of England, part of the UK. But in 1999, Scotland developed its own parliament. So the First Minister of Scotland sort of runs Scottish Parliament. They do their own laws, their own rules. So you'll see some differences in laws between England and Scotland. You'll see some differences in, even things like road signs and similar things. So while they're bound with union with the UK, they also still have their own entity. In October 2012, there was an Edinburgh Agreement that was signed between Alex Salmond and the UK Prime Minister, sort of giving Scotland under a little bit more freedom. And then we found in not even 2014, what this did was this opened it up for a referendum for Scottish independence. And in 2014, the Scottish Parliament wanted to confirm that it had the power to hold a vote that would be respected by both governments, that would say, should it be an independent country? And so through this referendum for Scottish independence, there was a national vote in 2014 to see if Scotland could become its own actual independent country. And you can see here sort of the results of that vote from September 18th, 2014. It was, the majority said no. What was interesting, this is 84% voter turnout, one of the largest voter turnouts in the history of the country, in the history of the UK. So it was very highly contested. Last time we were there, it was very much in the media, very talked about. We were a little nervous last time we were there because of all of the discussions about this, and was there going to be any rioting or any issues, and actually it stayed fairly safe, fairly calm. But it does show you the saturation of the majority of the country wanted to stay in part of the UK and did not want to go into independence. there's a lot of tradition that happens in Scotland, things that we see throughout Scotland that we hear as tradition, but actually weren't always developed there in Scotland. Kilts, tartan, and bagpipes have always been seen as Scottish type things. Whenever you hear of the Highlands or Scotland, you think of kilts, you think of the tartan, you think of the bagpipes, but actually they were all developed elsewhere. Kilts actually originated in Ireland, but are a historical, cultural dress in Scotland. Tartans have been found all the way back into the Bronze Age of Central Europe. If you're not sure what a tartan is, the tartan is the actual plaid, the make of the plaid, the color, the shape of the box, everything. And when we go into Edinburgh, there's a woolen mill there, and you can look at different tartans for different ages, so for different families. So if your family has any Scottish descent, you can find which tartan. So you don't just go pick which tartan for your kilt you think is pretty, you pick the one that goes with your family name. And then bagpipes are thought to actually have come from Central Asia, but are very popular in Scotland. And when we meet next, I'll play you some Scottish rock that was all on bagpipes, so some interesting things. Whiskey is also a huge Scottish tradition. Scottish whiskey was first found in 1495. So a lot of times you'll hear of whiskey, you'll hear of Scotch. Whiskey created in Scotland is Scotch whiskey. There's a whole Scotch experience, whiskey experience throughout Edinburgh. So while we hear a lot about whiskey in the United States around Kentucky, sort of that bourbon trail, the Scotch tradition, however, is in Scotland. And so a lot of people will go to Scotland to learn and partake in sort of this history of whiskey. Golf is also a huge tradition. St. Andrews, which hopefully we'll be able to drive by, we did last time, is considered the home of golf. Sport's been played there since the 15th century, and so the modern day governing body of golf everywhere except for the U.S. and Mexico is there in Scotland at St. Andrews. And truthfully, up through 2009 and probably even to today, golf accounted for a large part of their tourism. There's over 500 courses, and a lot of people want to play St. Andrews because it's the home of golf. So if you know any golfers, golf balls from Scotland are always a great gift to bring home because true golfers know that Scotland is the home of golf. Edinburgh is the capital, where it's where we will spend some time as a photo looking out over Edinburgh. It was sort of built like Rome. It was built on hills, and it was the first city in the world to actually have a fire brigade in 1824. So London had the first first police. Edinburgh had the first fire brigade, so we're definitely safe. In 1908, RAF La Tours in Fife was developed and is the oldest continuously operating military air base in the world. So it has a long tradition of sort of that service of fire, military, that type of thing. Art, just as England is very prominent in their art and literature, so is Scotland. Probably all heard of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes. He was born in the city's Newtown there in Edinburgh. J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter, as I said, somewhat is from the UK. She wrote her first book in a coffee shop there in Edinburgh, and we will walk past that coffee shop, and you can look out the window of the coffee shop and look at some of the church structures around that area, and you can really see how she described the school in her book, matching some of that. Other writers, Sir Walter Scott, Robert Borges, Lord Byron, Robert Louis Stevenson, all names that you've seen. Actors, Sean Connery, Gerard Butler, Ewan McGregor, all people that you've heard of with a sort of Scottish accent, or Scottish tradition. Alexander Graham Bell was born in Edinburgh, so there's definitely some famous. Charles Darwin, in terms of Darwinism, studied at the University of Edinburgh. Television was developed by John Lloyd Baird, who was from Edinburgh, penicillin. Alexander Fleming was there in Edinburgh. And what I found really interesting is the Encyclopedia Britannica was first published in Edinburgh from 1768 to 1771. And this was actually a photo I took on one of the businesses there in Edinburgh. Certain parents of Sir Walter Scott resided at this location, but it was also the first home of the Encyclopedia Britannica. And so the first 9 editions were all edited in Scotland. And while you guys don't have Encyclopedia Britannicas at your homes, probably growing up, my generation before me, everybody always had a whole Encyclopedia Britannica at their house. Obviously now it's online, but still a big. And if you look at the sort of the monarch of the Britannica, their logo, it's the thistle for Scotland. Another cool story about Scotland that we'll get to see is Greyfriars Bobby. Greyfriars Bobby is a really cool story. Bobby is a little Scottish dog who belonged to John Grey. He was a night watchman for Edinburgh City Police back in the 1800s. And this little dog became very famous for his loyalty. When John died, Bobby was said to have sat at his grave for over 14 years. Every day he would find him sitting on his master's grave. And when he died in 1872, he was then buried not too far from John Grey's grave. And so Bobby's collar is in the Museum of Edinburgh. It was given to him by Sir William Chambers, the Lord Provost of Edinburgh, and SSPCA director. Greyfriars Bobby, these are 2 photos that I took. We'll get to see his gravesite. We'll also get to see his owner, John Grey's. There's a pub after him, named after him in this area of Edinburgh. So it's sort of a cool little story. So you'll hear a lot about Greyfriars Bobby all over Edinburgh. 16 years, 14 of those years he lived laying on his master's grave every day. So let his loyalty and devotion be a lesson to us all. Food and drink, similar to what we'll see in England, very rich, thick foods. Haggis is a very traditional meal, normally made with the heart, liver, and lungs of a sheep, and boiled in a stomach. So that's what this example is down here. You will have a chance to try it if you would like. If you do not want to attempt it, that's fine. They do a lot of seafood, they do a lot of grains, they do a lot of potatoes. Potatoes are very popular, which you've probably heard of, sort of the potato famine. Potatoes were a large staple for people in the country. And the Highlands, during the 1840s, there was a huge potato famine. And by 1846, 1852, only 1.7 million, over 1.7 million people left Scotland because there was a bug that was killing off all of the potatoes. And so this potato famine, basically during the 19th century caused malnutrition, disease, hardship to farmers, disruption of the rural community, so people had to leave. It was sort of just destruction of the whole potato crop during the 40s. And so many people left, and that's why we see a lot of people with Scottish heritage today, because of that potato famine. But potatoes still continue to be a large crop and a large part of their diet. 75% of the landmass is agricultural production. Production output is 2.3 billion pounds a year. So it's a large portion of their food exports, with 2.4 billion pounds of that being whiskey. So whiskey, again, a very large part of their agriculture. 65,000 people are probably directly around that are directly employed in agriculture. It's the 3rd largest employer in all of Scotland after service and public sectors. So agriculture, just as in England, is very large. It's even in the US, it's very similar. Many of our jobs are dependent on agriculture. Farming in Scotland was a 630 million pound venture back in 2008. So farming is huge. throughout Scotland. And as I said, we'll talk a lot more about agriculture in these areas. Very similar to England, what we'll see in terms of types, specialty sheep, cattle and sheep, lowland cattle and sheep, very, very popular. Sheep are very large, along with general dairy cropping, dairy. Potatoes would probably run into this general crop type area. But the majority of what they farm is sheep and cattle. Sheep farming is going to be most predominant in the northwest and the south, and since we're going to be in the south, we're going to see that. We'll see a lot of Scottish blackface sheep, this is a Scottish blackface sheep. We're going to see a lot of large cereal farms in the east, sort of cereal grains. I said we would see things like rye, barley, rapeseed, those kinds of things. Beef farming does take place throughout Scotland, but it's more common in the southwest. You tend to hear of the Galloway, the Shorthorns, the Highland. All of those are coming from Scotland. In terms of the sheep, the Cheviot, the Scottish Mule, the Texel, the Shetland, all of those sort of large wool breeds come from Scotland. And there's a lot of wool being produced in Scotland, and we'll see a lot of woolen mills in Scotland. So as we go through Scotland, we're going to see a very rich farming background, rich. There is a science and advice for Scottish agriculture. It's sort of their government. It's their USDA. It's sort of on the western edge of Edinburgh. And they do have a Scottish Agricultural College, which we'll get to visit a little bit and talk to some of the people who are the educators and the researchers in agriculture in Scotland. So again, just a quick overview of Scotland, similar to England. I hope some little tidbits and facts to keep in your mind as we tour around. Remember to send me one fact that you thought was the most interesting, as well as a fact about yourself that maybe we don't know. And we will get together next week again with a new video talking about sort of some of the agriculture environment regulations, as well as the media over in the UK. I look forward to talking to you guys later. Stay dry.